Any? Go ahead. Go ahead. Nityodita. Na, never. Uttama Shloka. The personality of Godhead, of whom the Vedic hymns sing. Vardhanam. Of those who live on them. Jushyatam. Of those who are engaged in. Tat, his. Kathā-amṛtam, the transcendental topics about him. Syat, it so happens. Sambrama, misconception. Anta, at the end. Kale, in time. Api, also. Smaratam, remembering. Tat, his. Parambujam, lotus feet. Translation. This was so because those who have dedicated their lives to the transcendental topics of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, of whom the Vedic hymns sing, and who are constantly engaged in remembering the lotus feet of the Lord, do not run the risk of having misconceptions, even at the last moment of their lives. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. The highest perfection of life is attained by remembering the transcendental nature of the Lord at the last moment of our lives. This perfection of life is made possible by one who has learned the actual transcendental nature of the Lord from the Vedic hymns, sung by a liberated soul like Shukadeva Goswami, or someone in that line of disciplic succession. There is no gain in hearing the Vedic hymns from some mental speculator. When the same is heard from an actual self-realized soul and is properly understood by service and submission, everything becomes transparently clear. Thus, a submissive disciple is able to live transcendently and continue to the end of life. By scientific adaptation, one is able to remember the Lord even at the end of life, when the power of remembrance is slackened due to derangement of bodily membranes. For a common man, it is very difficult to remember things as they are at the time of death. But by the grace of the Lord and his bona fide devotees, the spiritual masters, one can get this opportunity without difficulty. And it was done in the case of Mahārāja Parīkṣit. Translation again, I'll say you please repeat. This was so because those who have dedicated their lives to the transcendental topics of the personality of Godhead, of whom the Vedic hymns sing, and who are constantly engaged in remembering the lotus feet of the Lord, do not run the risk of having misconceptions, even at the last moment of their lives. Om Gyantimirandasya Giranjana Shalakaya Chakshurumiritamina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanyam Nomishtam Stapitam Nena Bhutale Swayam Rupakaramayam Tadati Swapadantikam. We are born in the darkness of ignorance, but our spiritual master has forced to open our eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. Therefore we offer a most humble and respectful obeisance unto his lotus feet. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pasta Bhutale Chimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvasesha Sunyavadi Pasya Chadisatadane Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasudhi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Vancha Kalpatrivasya Kripa Sindhuvevacha Patitanam Avanevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namaha. So this shloka today starts out with the 3 words, this was so. So, this was so is referring to the previous 3 verses. In other words, that Mahārāja Parīkṣit was saved by the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the womb of his mother Uttara. And that he was not overcome by fear, even at the most fearful moment of his life. And that he was actually able to understand the position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this was so. In other words, he was able to do all these 3 things because he had dedicated his life to the transcendental topics of the personality of God. And how did he do that? When he got word that the end was near, he decided to give up all material activities. He was the king of the world. He gave it up. He had family. He gave it up. He had bodily demands, such as eating and sleeping and even drinking water. He gave all that up. To do what? Not just to be known as a renounced person. There are many renounced persons in the world. They give up all kinds of things. That is not the qualification to become fearless, to be saved by the Lord, and to understand the position of the Lord. He gave all these things up so he could concentrate with one point of attention on the topics of Krishna, as spoken by Shukadeva Goswami on that bank of the Ganges. He was completely focused. That's what it means to dedicate one's life to the topics of the Lord. One has to have rapt attention. Prabhupada uses that word, rapt attention. And Krishna is known as Uttama Shlok. He is glorified by the best poetry, shloka. We were talking the other day in our Nectar devotion, reading that the praise of the Lord is done in songs. We have Bhagavad Gita is a song of God. We have Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. These are beautiful Sanskrit verses which we are not actually able to relish to its full extent. But there's rhythm, there's poetry, there's meter, there's rhyme. And these could be sung very beautifully. And if you have the opportunity to listen to Srila Prabhupada chanting Sanskrit, I was listening this morning. The microphone is it's like Corona personified. It actually looks like a Corona thing, like a circle with thing. If somebody would purify the microphone, I would I'm usually very close to this microphone. I don't know if it interferes with the class. I'll try to speak louder. You have some? Okay, yeah, just rub it on the thing. That's better. Okay, kill all the germs. Oh, when you happen to when you can listen to Srila Prabhupada chanting in Sanskrit, it's so melodious, and sometimes you can take that opportunity and understand how these Vedic hymns are meant to be sung in glorification of the personality of Godhead. There was, in the biography of Prabhupada, it's mentioned, I think Allen Ginsberg talks about when he met Prabhupada, although he could not understand the Sanskrit verses Prabhupada was quoting, it was like music to his ears. He was a poet himself and appreciated poetry. Even though he didn't know the language, he was appreciating that it was sung with such devotion. So, the purpose of becoming absorbed, here's explained. The purpose of becoming absorbed in hearing is to remember Krishna at the critical time of death, the examination. And this Sanskrit in this verse also reminds us of two very famous verses in the Bhagavad Gita. You have this Antakale is in this Sanskrit. And it's from the 8th chapter entitled Attaining the Supreme. Antakale chamamevya eva smaramukta kalevaram ya prayati sadbhavam yati nasya asamshayam. And whoever at the end of his life quits his body remembering me alone at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. So here we're in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, but again, the same themes are running through even the most basic theme of remembering Krishna at the time of death is being mentioned. The next verse, yam yam vapi smaram bhavam tyajat ante kalevaram. Again, this term ante. Ante kalevaram is there. Whatever state of being one remember when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. The same thing being emphasized here, how important it is to remember Krishna. Now, Mahārāja Parīkṣit was no ordinary soul. He was not a sadhana siddha. He was not struggling to remember Krishna, but he was setting an example how to remember Krishna by becoming absorbed in hearing about Krishna. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. This Smaranam is also mentioned in this verse, right? Smaratam. So that comes. We can't remember Krishna unless we hear and chant his glories. It will not be possible. This is a scientific, probably mentions here in the purport, it is science. What did he say? Where is this? By scientific adaptation. Prabhupada say, by scientific adaptation, one is able to remember the Lord even at the time of death. The Krishna consciousness is a science, right? So the Acharyas, the Mahajans has given us this path, these verses from the 7th canto, this famous verse from the 7th canto that we attribute to Prahlad Maharaj, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Bhadasevanam, Archanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atnamani, Vedanam. These are all the processes of devotional service to help us remember Krishna. Now these, again, the Sanskrit hymns, it is beautifully composed, not whimsically composed. Is scientifically composed in order, right? Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. So the emphasis is, again, back on hearing. So, Mahārāja Parīkṣit was not a sadhana siddha. He was not struggling as we struggle to, explained by Rupa Goswami, even though this is, what is this called here? Kathā-amṛtam. Kathā-amṛtam. If you analyze the word, katha means talking about Krishna, talks by Krishna. Amritam actually, Prabhupada translated here as transcendental topics about Krishna. But amritam, amrit, charnamrit, it is the nectar. It is nectar. The nectar of the personality of God. The nectar of the topics of the personality of God. So although it is nectar for the conditioned soul, it's described, we do not taste the sweetness of this because we have a disease of material contamination. We are suffering from the jaundice of attraction to sense enjoyment. And therefore, the taste, the sweet taste of this amrit. We were telling a story the other day about how the charnamrit, Prabhupada explains in the Nectar of Devotion, the charnamrita is the bath water coming from the Lord mixed with yogurt and sugar and brought into the temple, and the devotees can relish a few drops or maybe more. That is the standard. And we were remembering how one time Prabhupada was here at New Vrindavan and he was taking charnamrit. Because I was explaining how when I first came to New Vrindavan, prasadam was very austere, but there was one nectar that you could always count on, and that was the charnamrita. Thick Krishna's yogurt, Krishna's cow's yogurt, mixed with sugar or honey. And you could go, the first few days when I was here, I was a hippie stoner, I was coming in, and I knew any time of the day I could come in and get that charnamrita. And it was so satisfying, It was like a sweet in the middle of the day, which was kind of unheard of back in those days. But one time Prabhupada came, and he went to get some charnamrita, and he offered him the charnamrita, and he looked at it, and his face just became contorted. Like, what is this? Who has made this charnamrita? Devotee came forward. This is all salt. This is salt in it. There's a salt and a sugar in an unmarked bottle. Look exactly the same. And if you're following the strict standards of deity worship, you do not taste the bhoga before it is offered. So somebody had mixed the bottles or whatever. Anyway, it's supposed to be sweet, right? The Krishna katha is supposed to be sweet. We have to force ourselves to listen because we have jaundice and it tastes bitter. When you have jaundice, sweet, we had jaundice too. New Vrindavan had a lot of jaundice. And we were quarantined. This is not the first quarantine, okay, folks? This is not the first quarantine. But I was fortunate. I was quarantined away from the brahmacharya ashram, away from the Bahulaban, and was stuck in a trailer. But not by myself, by good fortune. Radhanath also had jaundice at the exact same time that I had. We were quarantined together. And it was actually during that time when we, at least I did, he probably already knew, but I memorized the Shikshastakam prayers, listening every day to Prabhupada chanting it in Sanskrit. So, so we don't taste the sweetness of Krishna katha, therefore we have to force ourselves to come to Bhagavatam class. We have to force ourselves to read Bhagavad Gita. We have to force ourselves because we're not tasting the sweetness. Because when you have jaundice, you can't taste anything. Sweet tastes bitter. So, but the medicine, explained by Rupa Goswami, is to continue to taste it, even if it's bitter, and then it'll become sweet. So this kathā-amṛtam, this is the life. What should I say? This is the process, and this is the goal. Sometimes you have a process. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to get my degree. That's not your program. Of course, some people are eternal students. They keep going to school for, beginning their what's the order? Their degree, their BA, and then their, what's it called? Next one is the, MA, and then there's a PhD. So you could go for school for practically 20 years. But anyway, the goal is not to go to school. The goal is to have a career, right? But in Krishna consciousness, the process and the goal are the same. To be swimming in the nectar of topics about Krishna. That is the process, And that is the goal. As we see here, Mahārāja Parīkṣit was not a sadhana siddha. He had seen Krishna in the womb. And Krishna is, and what, in the womb of who? He was so fortunate that he had a mother who was a pure devotee of Krishna. By her prayers. Krishna just didn't appear, Krishna just didn't appear because he liked Mahārāja Parīkṣit. He appeared in the womb to Mahārāja Parīkṣit because of the prayers of his mother, Uttara. She prayed. What was her prayer? My dear Lord, please save the child in my womb. I don't care if I die. That is a great example. I don't care if I die. That's the ultimate sense of protection. When you're willing to give your life to serve others. So, of course, by her prayers, Krishna appeared in the womb. And then Mahārāja Parīkṣit became famous as Vishnu Rata, or Parīkṣit the examiner. He was always looking for Krishna, and anytime there was an opportunity, he would examine. Where can I see this personality again? So that's the good fortune of being born in a devotee family, or to be in a society of devotees, that they will be praying for your spiritual life. This is one of the other processes, praying. The prayers, we were reading last night, the prayers of the devotees, prayers glorifying devotees, these are also prayers to Krishna, because the devotee is only glorious in relationship to Krishna. So we hear the prayers of the, we're singing every day, we're starting anyway, the prayers to the 6 Goswamis. I was explaining to the devotees that these prayers, it's to the prayers to the 6 Goswamis, but these are prayers glorifying Krishna. Because a devotee, it means nothing but Krishna. It's transparent. So, Mahārāja Parīkṣit, in the womb he saw Krishna, and when he was a child, Prabhupada explains in the 2nd canto, when he was a child, Mahārāja Parīkṣit would be playing with dolls of Krishna. His parents, his mother, made sure that he was surrounded by seeing the deity worship, playing with dolls that were of Krishna. We have these Krishna dolls. And Prabhupada mentions in that purport that as Mahārāja Parīkṣit was fortunate to have an opportunity for deity worship at a very young age, he was also blessed with devotee parents who gave him that opportunities. And Prabhupada said this is the way. The history of many such devotees is almost the same, because there is always symmetry between the early lives of all great devotees of the Lord. According to Jiva Goswami, Mahārāja Parīkṣit must have heard about the childhood pastimes of Krishna at Vrindavan, for he used to imitate the pastimes with his young playmates. How fortunate, and Prabhupada used to say, that the children of the Hare Krishna movement, back in when the children first were coming, Malati had one of the first. Did you have the first child, or one of the first children born in the Hare Saraswati? Hare Krishna. So Saraswati, that first child, and how fortunate to be born in a family of devotees. And Saraswati went on the same adventures that Malati did, and met Prabhupada, and saw deities, was playing with deities, was singing Krishna. Famous that, that Prabhupada glorified her. So. Because she used to go around to people, at least that's the story. Saraswati, as a 5-year-old child, she used to go around to people and say, "Do you know who Krishna is?" 3. Okay, 3.5 to 4, she would go up to anybody and she would say, do you know who Krishna is? And if they said no, she would say, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of God. And Prabhupada said, this is preaching. One time he was meeting with his sannyasis. And he gave this, he was explaining to them. Well, he was questioning them. He said that, he says, unless you're convinced that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of God, then you cannot preach. You have to be convinced that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of God. Otherwise, what good is your preaching? So this very basic principle. One time in the early days, some person out, not off the street exactly, but had just come to the temple, and he asked, Swamiji, can I get initiated? Who is God? He says, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of God. Who are you? I'm a spirit soul. Okay, you can get initiated. Prabhupada was very liberal in those early days. These are basic points. Having the fortune of being born in a family of devotees, or being in association of devotees, because Prabhupada explains that the process of bhakti yoga is so powerful that even if you missed out your whole childhood and were engaged in crazy things, still the process of bhakti yoga is so powerful that anyone at any age can come and make rapid advancement through this process of Shravanam, hearing. This is how powerful it is. And later on, now this is mentioned in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam that when Mahārāja Parīkṣit had primed himself for this snake bird to come, he had finished 7 days of hearing this Krishna, this kathā-amṛtam, just before the snake bird came, according to Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Who came? His mother came. Uttara came, and she asked him, can you summarize everything you just learned in these past 7 days, all these topics of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam? And then he began to narrate the whole Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, which Prabhupada says it is the essence of the Bhāgavatam. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. It is the nectar condensed. It's like if you take milk and you boil it, you can make sweet rice. You can make. We were reading about sweet rice last night. What were we hearing about, Moksha, about sweet rice? He cooked the sweet rice, and sweet rice is milk that is partially cooked. But if you keep cooking the milk, then you make so many other wonderful things like burfi, pera, koa, so many things. It becomes sweeter, thicker and thicker and thicker. So, so Bhagavatamrita, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, it is a condensed Bhagavatam. So therefore, by the grace of Prabhupada's followers, they have translated this Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam for all of us today. So, how fortunate we are to be in an association of devotees to hear about. So that what? Prabhupada says here, there's a risk, right? And this is also, Prabhupada used to say this. Prabhupada used to sing this verse, right? Krishna Tvadiya Parabam. Anyway, I'm forgetting, but it was a prayer by King Kulashekhar that he's saying, let me die now while my mind is absorbed in Krishna Katha, because at the time of death my throat will choke up and my mind will be disturbed. The airs of my body will be disturbed. Less like a swan likes to play in the stems, entangled. So, really, for devotees, this is the goal: to become entangled in Krishna's service. Ooh, I don't want to become entangled. I don't want to become entangled. We do want to become entangled in Krishna's service, in Krishna Katha. So, some simple points for today's class. Any questions or comments anyone would like to make with the microphone? If there is one. Hare Krishna. Mathuraji, always enthusiastic to ask. And this is what produced the Bhagavatam. This is what produced the Bhagavad Gita. This is what produced the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Somebody asked the question. I don't know if I can answer, but thank you.
You know, when you're mentioning about that it's not possible to remember Krishna throughout our life, or what to speak at the time of death, if we're not regularly hearing about Krishna.
Yes.
I noticed devotees like Dhanavir Maharaj, when we went on Harinam with him, he was in the front seat, of the van, and then immediately he would say, okay, open up the Krishna book and let's hear. Let's hear some pastime. So, he didn't skip a beat, as they said. He was always hearing. But I wonder, someone on this level of advancement, or all these other very advanced devotees that are in our society, do they have to keep hearing? Or, I guess because I'm saying this because, well, sometimes I wonder how absorbed do you have to get? Because a lot of us become distracted with our duties if we're not total brahmacharis, or just have nothing else to do except just live that simple life and just keep hearing all day long. So it seems sometimes difficult for the influence of Maya that we just get distracted from that.
We were talking about that last night. The chapter in Nectar Devotion was techniques of remembrance. Something like that. Techniques for hearing and remembering. Something like that. So before the class I said, well, here's a technique that's not listed in Nectar of Devotion, but that we used to do as, that we can still do. And I pulled out index cards. And I was explaining to the devotees that when you're doing simple service all day and your mind doesn't require your engagement of your mind, if you're farming or, simple services, construction, then you write down a verse and you try to remember that verse. And that verse becomes your association. You are associating with Lord Chaitanya if you write down Shikshastika, or you're associating with Lord Krishna when he's speaking. What the best associate when you're associating with Prahlad Maharaj and you write down the verses and try to remember them, then you're engaged in that process. It's not that you have to hear so much and not remember anything. It's good to it's a quality. We're talking about hearing. Hearing is not just listen. It's not meant to come in one ear and out the other. It's meant to go in the ear and then go into the heart and then act on it. That's real hearing. So if we're hearing and hearing and hearing, but it's not changing our lives, then we have to ask, what is the quality of our hearing? What is the quality of our hearing? So if the hearing goes in our ear and enters into our heart, and then we act on that instruction. The spiritual master says, bring me a glass of water. Or I was saying how in household life, I have to confess, sometimes my wife will tell me something, and I'll definitely hear it, but it won't go into my heart and I won't act on it. So that kind of hearing is useful. If you actually heard and you acted on it. So that's the kind of hearing that's important. So we can try to increase our, try to strengthen our remembrance through concentrated hearing and chanting. And somebody like, you say, these devotees, maybe they're so advanced they're not continuing hearing, but what are they doing? They're preaching. And that means the person who's preaching hears the most. One time I was asked in a class, what about the person, who makes most advancement? The person speaking or the person hearing? Well, the answer that I heard was, the person who's speaking, they're benefiting the most. Because to speak, you have to have heard. So hearing and chanting, and then remembering, when you speak, it'll also help you remember. So quantity and quality are important. And, some great devotees in our movement have made tools for us to increase our hearing. There's, what is it? Sage by page, Sage page by page, right? It's an app by Vashishika Prabhu. You could read the whole Bhagavatam and how much time you want to spend. You could figure out how many pages you read a day. He also has a program called Chad, chapter a day. You read one chapter a day, Bhagavad Gita. So it doesn't take a lot of time. But we have bad habits. So let our minds space out. I'm the worst. We have bad habits, letting our mind just go and not being productive. It's like if we want to be productive mentally, Prabhupada said ultimately, it was in the beginning of Nectar Devotion, Prabhupada explains that Rupa Goswami calls it devotional service. Bhakti is defined as devotional service, not devotion. Bhakti, you can say bhakti is devotion, but the acharyas have defined it as devotional service. That means there's activity. It's not just a type of meditation. So there's two kinds of culture. There's the external culture. We should be busy in our engaging. Savai Mana Krishna Pada, external culture, being engaged. And therefore the acharyas you read, we're rereading this Nectar Devotion, there's so many instructions how to be engaged in temple worship. Things we should do, things that we should not do. But then Prabhupada makes the point that ultimately Krishna consciousness is about the mental culture. The mental culture of Krishna consciousness. The quality of our thoughts. And this is what the whole verse today, the corollary verses of Bhagavad Gita is about. The quality of our thoughts at the moment of death, which Mahārāja Parīkṣit was so fortunate, he knew when it was coming. We do not know. So fill up the the blank time, the blank space. Any other questions, comments? It's an important subject matter when you think about it. I mean, of course, you guys are all young, but we're thinking, the older devotees are all thinking, okay, well, really, how much? Of course, it could come at any time, but the older our bodies become, the more we're actually thinking, well, maybe I'm next in the big line. There's a website where you can get on this line of all the Prabhupada disciples that were initiated. And there's this website too for Prabhupada disciples, and every week practically, So one is leaving this world. So the idea is that, hey, old age is a great time to become Krishna conscious. It may not be a good time for so many other things, but it's a great time to really be focused on the quality of our hearing and chanting. And preaching to myself. Thank you so much. Any other points, questions? Yes, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu, for a wonderful class. So as it mentioned here, at the time of death, if it is difficult for us to remember the Lord, by the help of devotees and spiritual master, the facilities can be provided. But sometimes situation comes like that. We may not be with any devotees. We don't know how we are going to leave our body.
Mm-hmm.
And we are not in a position to remember the Lord. So what happens at that time?
Well, the time of death is the examination. And if we've been preparing for the final exam, then we do have devotees. Devotees have helped us all along. And if we have the sudden examination, those devotees are still, their energy. We are not, what is a saying that no man is an island, you know? So in other words, that anything, there's a beautiful prayer by in the songbook. Gurudev, your mercy is all that I'm made of. Well, the Vaishnava, Vaishnava Thakur, you know, we're praying for the mercy of the Vaishnava. So whatever we are as a devotee, we can't take credit for. I mean, just like even these great sports figures, when they win a championship, the humble ones, and you know, they'll start saying, "Well, you know, we couldn't have got here without the coach, without my players, without my teammates." You know, they get credit. So in the same way as devotees, you know, we should understand that we are a product of so many moments and hours and days and weeks and months and years of association with other devotees who've lifted up, who've given us. So we're never alone. When Prabhupada was in America, you know, and he was interviewed, and he said, I might be here alone, but I'm not alone. I've never felt a moment separate that I'm by myself, that I'm without my spiritual master. So this is how we have to perceive. So if something happens, ultimately it's Krishna's will, right? How we lead. Now, if there's some, you know, obviously some incredible fortune, and Prabhupada set the example, to leave his body surrounded by loving devotees in the holy Dham. And many of my god brothers and god sisters have followed that incredible example. But it's not always possible, you know. But Krishna, you know, if you're chanting, Prabhupada said, if you're chanting high, devotees are, if you were made Malik, you might have been there when Janaki stole the ticket, and there was like, and they were crying, Prabhupada, you're going to India. Prabhupada said, well, I'm chanting. If you're chanting Hare Krishna and I'm chanting Hare Krishna, then we're together. So, you know, we have to look at it as a transcendental thing, and it's not a mechanical. We can't mechanically plan our death. I mean, of course, if we get some kind of call, my god brother Niguna Prabhu, he was a Sankirtan devotee. I used to meet him all the time, all over the country. He was doing Sankirtan. When he got the call that he couldn't overcome his illness, you know, he went to Mayapur, and with the help of devotees, he had a glorious passing. So yeah, how fortunate. But if something happens, like my nephew, you know, he was on Sankirtan, he was a little inattention, boom, truck hit the car, all 3 devotees left. So yeah, but his accumulated service and the prayers and the well-wishing of so many devotees, you know, that is something that you can't calculate materially. Oh, he's not surrounded by devotees. Yes, we are surrounded by devotees, even if we're not physically with devotees. If we're trying to render service and we're part of this wonderful family of devotees, then we have the association of devotees at all times. Does that address that? Thank you for your kind attention. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Grantaraj ki Shri